Hello, and welcome back to Void Whispers. Before we dive in, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I read every single one, and it means a lot. Just a quick note, in the first 10 minutes you might see 2 to 3 short ads. After that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. If you love dark, emotional horror that pulls at your soul, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1, do not order it. Anything but the crunchy cookie for dessert. The chocolate delight, please, she says to the waitress. Damn it. The date had been going perfectly until that moment. We had laughed at the same stupid jokes, talked about movies, complained about work, and even agreed that the music in the restaurant was too loud. For once, I had managed to get through dinner without making things awkward. Then she ordered the one dessert I could not eat. The waitress nods and starts to walk away. I try to hide the look on my face, but apparently I am not very good at it. Why that face? My date asks. Damn, she is observant. Nothing. She studies me for another second. Do you not like chocolate? I do. Then what? Before I can answer, she raises her hand, trying to get the waitress's attention again. We can change it for the cake, she says in that gentle voice people use when they think they have accidentally made someone uncomfortable. No, it's fine. She lowers her hand. You sure? I hesitate. There is no point hiding it forever. If the date goes well, she is going to find out eventually. Honestly, I say, I just wouldn't really be able to taste it. She gives me a confused look. I take a breath. Then I reach into my mouth and remove my teeth. Her eyes widen. I place the dentures carefully on a napkin beside my plate. Then I smile. Only one real tooth remains in my gums. It sits alone, surrounded by empty pink spaces and scar tissue. She does not scream. She does not laugh. To her credit, she does not even look disgusted. She just stares at my mouth for a few seconds, then back at me. I know that look. She is not judging me. She is waiting for the story. It began in 1991. My mother was staring at my elementary school graduation portrait like someone had handed her evidence of a crime. Everything else about the picture was perfect. My hair had been carefully styled. My shoes were polished until they reflected light. My shirt and pants had no wrinkles. My mother had prepared me that morning with the kind of attention normally reserved for a wedding or a funeral. But there was one problem. My smile. More specifically, the hole in it. I had recently lost a tooth, and the gap was right in front. It was not one of those missing molars hidden at the back of the mouth where nobody would notice. No, this gap had chosen the most visible position possible, right there in the center. I smiled at my mother. She looked at the photograph. Then she looked at me. Her expression somehow became even more disappointed. No, she said. That was all. Just one word. The photograph, which was still warm from the instant printing process, disappeared into her purse. It was never framed. It was never placed in one of the albums. It was never shown to relatives. As far as my mother was concerned, that graduation portrait did not exist. She preferred another picture of me, taken near a strange monument of 2 dancing dogs. I never understood why the town had a statue of dancing dogs, but my mother loved that photograph because I was holding one fist in front of my face. Behind my raised hand, you could still see part of my smile. The part that looked perfect. My mother hated imperfections in teeth. I never knew why. Some parents are obsessed with grades. Others care about sports. My mother made my mouth her life's mission. I did not simply brush my teeth in the morning and before bed like normal children. I brushed them constantly, 5 times a day, sometimes 6, after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner, after snacks, sometimes even after drinking something that was not water. Normal toothpaste was not good enough. My mother bought special whitening toothpaste and acted like using anything else would cause my teeth to rot instantly. My toothbrush was replaced almost every week. Then came mouthwash, then dental floss. Not a small amount either. My mother would hand me what felt like an entire rope of it. Every space between every tooth had to be cleaned. If there was even the smallest piece of food left behind, the process began again. Rinse, brush, floss, rinse again. Sometimes she would inspect my mouth afterward. If she was not satisfied, I went back to the bathroom. By the time I was 10 or 11, my dental routine felt more like a military operation than personal hygiene. The strangest part was that I accepted it. Children usually accept whatever reality their parents build for them. I thought every family cared that much about teeth. I thought every mother watched her child smile as if she were inspecting expensive jewelry. Then came graduation. The day my mother wanted everything to be perfect. And on that same day, I lost my final baby tooth. The timing almost felt planned by something. For months, the tooth had been loose. My mother tried everything. Crunchy vegetables, apples, hard foods, anything that might naturally help it fall out. At one point, she even considered pulling it herself. I refused. Then, on graduation day, it finally came free. I was not upset. Actually, I was excited because I had a tooth, a perfect tooth. My mother had spent years teaching me that clean, white, healthy teeth were valuable. And according to every story I had ever heard, there was someone else who valued them too. The tooth fairy. I had lost other teeth before, of course, but something about this final one felt special. Maybe because I was older. Maybe because it was in such good condition. Or maybe because I had already started thinking like a little businessman. Put the tooth under the pillow. Wake up. Collect money. Simple. Capitalism starts early. That night, I placed the tooth beneath my pillow. The next morning, I woke up and reached underneath. The tooth was still there. No coin. No bill. Nothing. I was furious. Years of brushing. Years of flossing. Years of mouthwash burning my tongue. And this was the reward? I marched to my mother and explained that something had clearly gone wrong. Maybe the tooth fairy had gotten lost. Maybe she had missed our house. Maybe there was some kind of scheduling issue. I started explaining the possible logistical problems involved in one fairy visiting millions of children around the world in a single night. My mother stopped listening somewhere around my explanation of international time zones. Still, I refused to give up. The next night, I put the tooth under my pillow again. Morning came. Still there. I tried again. And again. For 10 nights, I placed that tooth beneath my pillow. Every morning it greeted me. By the 11th night, I was done. One final attempt. If the tooth fairy ignored me again, I was throwing the tooth away. That night, I went to bed. Sometime later, I woke up. Not because of an alarm, not because of my mother, because my pillow moved. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then it moved again, very slowly. My eyes opened. A thin beam of moonlight crossed my bedroom. The window was open. I knew I had closed it. Standing beside my bed was a man. At least, I think he was a man. He was extremely thin. Not the healthy kind of thin. The kind where the bones seemed to be trying to escape through the skin. His face was narrow and deeply lined. His cheeks looked hollow. His arms seemed too long for his body. He smelled terrible. It was a mixture of mud, sweat, and the unmistakable smell of someone who had avoided soap for a very long time. But the worst part was his clothing. He was dressed like some horrible joke about a dentist. The uniform might once have been white, but now it was gray and covered in old stains. It was much too small for him. The shirt pulled tightly across his narrow chest. The collar exposed his dirty collarbones. Below that was something that looked almost like a short medical skirt. I did not want to look any closer. He leaned over me. I tried to scream. His long finger pressed against my lips. The smell on his hand was worse than the rest of him. I froze. My entire body refused to move. He reached beneath my pillow. His fingers closed around the tooth. Then he pulled it out. He held it up in the moonlight. For several seconds, he simply stared at it. He turned it between his fingers, examining it, admiring it. The way he looked at that tooth reminded me of the way my mother looked at my smile, except his expression was different, hungrier, more possessive. "Wait," he whispered. His voice was so quiet and rough that I barely understood him. He reached into his clothing. Then he pulled out a $100 bill. $100. At that age, the amount was beyond my understanding. It might as well have been $1 million. He held it toward me. I grabbed it. His cracked lips stretched into something close to a smile. "For someone with teeth as white as yours," he whispered, "there is much more." I stared at him. "Come with me." He straightened. His joints cracked loudly. My bedroom walls were covered with mirrors. My mother had placed them there because she wanted me to always be aware of how I looked. That night, every mirror reflected him. A thin, filthy man in a stained dentist costume standing beside my bed. He smiled again. Most of the teeth in his mouth were rotten. He held out his hand. I looked toward my bedroom door. "But my mom will be back before she notices." I believed him. I was a child. He had given me $100, and I believed in the tooth fairy. When I woke again, something was biting me. A rat. A real rat. Not some magical mouse that traded teeth for coins. The animal jumped away when I moved. I sat up. My head hurt. The place around me smelled like death. I was inside an old warehouse. At night, I had barely noticed where the man was taking me. In the morning light, I understood. It was not a magical workshop. It was a prison. The floor was covered in dirt and dried fluids. Old stains covered almost every surface. The metal furniture was so rusty that simply looking at it made me think of tetanus. A ruined mattress lay nearby. It smelled strongly of urine. I tried to stand. Metal pulled at my ankle. I looked down. A chain. I was shackled. I screamed. Nobody answered. I pulled harder. The chain scraped across the floor. Then I heard movement. The man returned. My tooth fairy. He looked irritated when he saw me trying to escape. He carried a bag of cheap food from a street vendor. In his other hand were toothbrushes, toothpaste, mouthwash, dental floss, more dental products than any child could possibly need. He fed me. Then he made me clean my teeth. At first, I thought he wanted to keep me healthy. That illusion disappeared quickly. Days passed. I lost track of how many. Every day followed the same routine. He would leave. I would sit chained inside the warehouse. Sometimes he disappeared for hours, sometimes almost an entire day. My only company was the rats. Outside, through a dirty window, I could sometimes see part of the city. Most importantly, I could see the monument of the dancing dogs. That was how I knew I was still somewhere near home. Close enough to recognize a statue. Far enough that nobody could hear me scream. The man returned with food. Then came the dental routine. Brush, floss, rinse again. If I did not do it correctly, he became angry. Compared to him, my mother suddenly seemed relaxed. He inspected every tooth. He rubbed his fingers across them. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes he whispered things I could not understand. The longer I stayed there, the worse everything became. I stopped caring about the smell. I stopped caring about the rats. I stopped caring about the dirt. Then, one night, he came back drunk. He was carrying something around his neck. At first, I thought it was a necklace made from white shells, something cheap that tourists might buy near a beach. Then he came closer. They were not shells. They were teeth, human teeth, dozens of them, maybe more. Different sizes, different colors. Some were small, some were large. Some still had dark stains near the roots. He touched them lovingly. That was when I understood. He had done this before. I was not the first child. After that, I tried to stop cleaning my teeth. I thought maybe if I ruined them, he would lose interest. But old habits are powerful. My mother had trained me too well. And when I refused, he forced me. One day, he brought out a camera. He took a photograph of me. He said it was for my mother. A ransom picture. I understood what he wanted. He wanted money. But before he took the picture, I raised my fist in front of my face. The same pose from my mother's favorite photograph. The picture beside the dancing dogs. I hoped she would understand. Maybe she would recognize it. Maybe she would know I was nearby. Eventually, something changed. I do not know how the police found the warehouse. Maybe my mother understood the photograph. Maybe someone recognized the location. Maybe the man made a mistake. I only know what happened on the final day. The day I became free. He dragged me toward an old bench. The wood was rotten. It looked as if it might collapse beneath my weight. By then, I was thin. Weak, filthy, my eyes were probably huge in my face. I remember looking at him and hoping that something in my expression might make him feel sorry for me. It did not. He smiled. Then he picked up a wrench. At first, I did not understand. Then he forced me down onto the bench. He climbed onto me. His weight pinned my body. I struggled. He grabbed my hair and pulled my head backward. My mouth opened. Then he inserted the metal tool. The first tooth came out with a sharp twist. The pain was beyond anything I had ever felt. It exploded through my jaw and into my skull. For 1 second, the world went black. When I could see again, he was holding my tooth. Whole. Perfect. He smiled. Then he reached for another, a canine. He twisted, pulled, I screamed. Blood filled my mouth. I choked on it. He did not stop. Another tooth, then another. My molars came next. Each one hit the floor with a small sound. Click, click, click. White teeth landing in red mud. I urinated on myself. I could not help it. The blood mixed with everything beneath me. He worked quickly. Professionally, almost. That was the worst part. He knew exactly what he was doing. There was no hesitation, No confusion, no mercy. He had done it many times before. Somewhere far away, I heard sirens. At first, I thought I imagined them. Then they grew louder. The man heard them too. He started moving faster. Another tooth came out, then two smaller ones. The pain became one continuous thing. My whole mouth burned. My jaw felt shattered. Blue and red lights appeared outside the warehouse. The walls flashed with color. Police, they had found me. The tooth fairy did not stop. He worked faster. A voice came through a megaphone. I could not understand what it said. I remember thinking that the megaphone was useless. Just come inside. Please, come inside. Another tooth was pulled. Then another. I thought he had taken them all. I thought the torture was finally over. Then his fingers touched the final tooth. The last stubborn one. The tooth that had refused to fully emerge. For the past 2 weeks, it had only pushed a few millimeters through the gum. He wanted it. Maybe because it was the last. Maybe because he could not stand leaving anything behind. He tried to grip it. The tool slipped. He tried again. Pain shot through my face, but the tooth would not come free. Someone knocked on the warehouse door. Knocked. The police knocked. I wanted to scream at them. For God's sake, come in. The man stood. He shoved me off the bench. I landed on my back. My head struck the floor. Blood does not make a good cushion. The world blurred. I watched him crawl around, grabbing teeth from the muddy floor. My teeth. He stuffed as many as he could into his pockets. The door finally burst open. Police officers rushed inside. The man turned. Someone shouted. He tried to move. His foot slipped in the blood and urine around the bench. There was a gunshot. The sound filled the warehouse. Something metallic crashed. Then, confusion. People shouting. Boots moving. Hands grabbing me. I do not remember exactly what happened after that. The tooth fairy disappeared. Maybe he escaped. Maybe he was arrested. Maybe he died. My memories of those seconds are broken. I remember the ambulance. I remember bright lights. I remember waking in the hospital. I remember my mother crying. I remember trying to speak and discovering how difficult it was without teeth. And I remember something else. Before they carried me out of that warehouse, I saw money on the floor. A roll of bills. The man must have dropped it while collecting my teeth. The police almost missed it. I pointed toward it. My payment. That was what I thought at the time. Payment for the perfect smile. Years of brushing. Years of flossing. Years of whitening toothpaste. Years of my mother making sure every tooth in my mouth was clean and beautiful. In the end, they were worth something, after all. Just not to the person we expected. The woman sitting across from me in the restaurant has not spoken for several seconds. My dentures are still resting on the napkin. The chocolate dessert arrives. The waitress places it between us. My date looks at the dessert, then at my single remaining tooth, then back at me. So, she says carefully, "You really met the tooth fairy?" I put my dentures back into my mouth. "No," I say. I look down at the crunchy chocolate topping. I met mine. Story 2. What happened to your sister? I hate that question. I hate when people come into my home, notice the photograph on the shelf, and immediately feel the need to ask about her. I understand why they are curious. The picture is old, and she is smiling in it. She looks young, happy, and full of life. Anyone who sees the photograph can tell that she meant something to me. She still does. That is exactly why I do not like talking about it. An accidental fire. I always say. That is the answer I have used for years. It is simple, believable, tragic enough that most people immediately regret asking and change the subject. It is also a lie. The truth began on Easter in 1989. It had been an unusually warm spring. Where we lived, we were used to rain during that time of year, but that Easter felt like something from a postcard. The sky was clear and blue. The sun was warm without being uncomfortable. Flowers had opened everywhere, filling gardens and parks with color. Birds moved through the trees, insects buzzed through the grass, and children ran around outside with the kind of careless happiness only children seem capable of. Everything about that day felt normal. Almost too normal when I think about it now. My mother had a tradition every Easter. During the weeks before the holiday, my little sister and I would decorate eggs. We painted them in bright colors, covered them with simple drawings, and filled some of them with confetti. Then, on Easter morning, Mom would hide them around the park. The goal was technically to find as many eggs as possible. But my sister and I had created our own tradition. Once we found the eggs, we used them as weapons. We chased each other through the park and smashed the eggs over each other's heads, covering ourselves in colorful bits of paper. It was harmless violence, the one day of the year when Mom allowed us to attack each other without immediately separating us and sending us to our rooms. We loved it. That year was no different at first. My basket was already nearly full when I noticed something unusual at the very bottom. An egg. But not one of ours. I knew that immediately. The eggs we decorated looked exactly like what they were, the work of children using cheap paint and too much imagination. This one looked like it belonged in a museum. Its shell was covered in complicated patterns. Tiny lines twisted into shapes I could not understand. Bright colors moved across the surface in detailed designs that seemed far too precise to have been painted by hand. I remember running my fingertips across it. The patterns were not simply painted onto the shell. I could feel them. Small raised lines, tiny grooves. The texture was almost hypnotic. I turned the egg slowly in my hand, completely fascinated. Even now, after all these years, I can still remember those colors. They were brighter than anything else in the park. They seemed almost alive. My sister noticed me staring at it and came over. "What did you find?" I held it up proudly. I thought I had discovered some special Easter egg that Mom had hidden as a surprise. Maybe it was worth extra points. Maybe there was candy inside. My sister smiled. Then, before I realized what she was doing, she snatched it from my hand and cracked it against the top of my head. We both expected confetti. There was none. For a second, I did not understand what had happened. Something warm ran down my forehead. Then came the smell. Even today, I struggle to describe it. It was like sewage mixed with rotting meat. The smell of something dead combined with the smell of something that had never been meant to live. I screamed. My sister screamed too. When I looked down, I saw blood covering my clothes. Not just blood, pieces of tissue. Thick, clear fluid. Something that looked disturbingly like organs. And then a small body fell from what remained of the shell. A fetus. At least that is the closest word I have for it. It was not human. It did not look like any animal we had learned about in school. Its body was small and pale, but its limbs seemed wrong. Too thin in some places. Too long in others. The shape of its head reminded me of some deep-sea creature, something that had evolved in complete darkness, where nature had been free to make mistakes. But the worst part was the amount of material that had come from the egg. It was impossible. The egg had been no larger than a normal chicken egg. Yet there was enough blood and fluid to soak my hair, my shirt, and part of the ground around me. It was as though the inside of the shell had been larger than the outside. It made no sense. My sister backed away from me. Her face had gone white. She stared at the small creature lying in the grass between us. Neither of us spoke. Mom found us that way. She hurried us home and washed me immediately. It took days before I stopped imagining that smell on my skin. I showered again and again. Mom washed my clothes several times before finally throwing them away. Even after that, I would occasionally turn my head and think I could smell it again. We never discovered where the egg had come from. Mom insisted that maybe some sick person had placed it in the park as a cruel joke. That explanation did not make sense. None of the explanations made sense. Eventually, we did what people often do when the truth is too uncomfortable. We stopped looking for an answer. As for the strange fetus, my sister felt responsible. She had broken the egg against my head. Somehow, in her mind, that meant she had killed whatever was inside. She was still young. Children sometimes carry guilt that does not belong to them. She gently cleaned the small body. Then she found a little cardboard box and decorated it. She drew flowers on the sides. She even wrote a few words on the lid. I do not remember exactly what they said. Something about being sorry. Something about hoping it found peace. My sister placed the creature inside. Then we carried the box into the backyard. Together, we dug a small hole beneath a tree. My sister said a little prayer. It sounded almost like a funeral speech. A funeral for something we could not identify. Something we had accidentally killed before we even knew it existed. Then we covered the box with dirt. We hoped that was the end. It was not. The problems began that same night. My sister and I shared a bedroom. We had 2 small beds placed parallel to each other with a little night lamp between them. We were normally comfortable there. The lamp made us feel safe. Children believe light has power over monsters. Maybe adults do too. That night, neither of us could sleep. We were both lying on our backs, staring at the ceiling. I knew she was awake. She knew I was awake. Neither of us wanted to talk about the egg. Then, something hit the roof. Boom. We both froze. At first, I thought maybe a tree branch had fallen. Then, it happened again. Boom. The sound was heavy. Too heavy. It felt as though someone had dropped a sledgehammer onto the roof directly above our bedroom. I slowly turned my head toward my sister. She was already looking at me. Boom. Again. Then again. Boom, boom, the strikes became faster. Whatever was above us was hitting the roof again and again. Neither of us screamed. Neither of us called for Mom. I still do not understand why. Maybe we were too frightened. Maybe some part of us believed that making noise would let whatever was outside know exactly where we were. The pounding continued for what felt like hours. It filled the night. At some point, it stopped. Neither of us slept. The next morning, we were exhausted. I could barely keep my eyes open at school. My teacher reported it. When Mom found out, she assumed my sister and I had stayed awake playing. We tried to explain. We told her something had been on the roof, something heavy, something hitting it repeatedly. Mom did not believe us. She punished us. For the next 3 days, life returned to normal. Then, Mom came home from work and found the backyard. I will never forget her face. At first, she simply stood near the door. Then, she slowly walked into the yard. Her denial began immediately. There has to be an explanation. She kept repeating variations of that sentence. The grass was destroyed. Mom loved that yard. She watered the grass constantly. She cared for the flowers as though they were members of the family. Now, large footprints crossed the entire yard. They were enormous, almost human in size. But they were not human. They looked like the tracks of some giant rodent. Long feet, strange toes, deep impressions in the soil. Whatever had made them had been heavy. Very heavy. The footprints crossed the yard in a direct line. They ended beneath the tree, at the place where my sister and I had buried the box. There was now a hole. The earth had been torn apart. The decorated cardboard box was broken open. The small body was gone. Mom accused us. She said we had dug it up. We denied it. We begged her to listen. But our story sounded impossible, even to us. Eventually, Mom stopped trying to argue calmly. We were punished again. A few weeks passed. The roof incident faded into memory. The footprints became something nobody discussed. The missing creature became another strange thing we were supposed to forget. For a while, we succeeded. Then, Mom found the bite marks. They were on the front door. Our front door was wooden and a little over 6 feet tall. At the very top, one corner had been damaged. Something had bitten it, not once. Repeatedly, the wood had been worn down by teeth, large teeth. The marks were far above anything my sister or I could have reached normally. Mom stared at them for a long time. For us to have caused that damage, one of us would have needed to stand on the other's shoulders. Then we would have needed to spend hours scratching and chewing the wood. We would also have needed several extra sets of teeth. For the first time, Mom believed we were innocent. That should have made me feel better. It did not. Because if we had not made those marks, something else had. Things became worse a few nights later. I woke to a roar, not an animal noise exactly. Something deeper, something that seemed to shake the walls. My sister sat up in bed. Mom came running from her room. Then we heard wood breaking downstairs. We left the bedroom. At the bottom of the stairs, the front door was gone, not open. Gone, it had been smashed inward. Pieces of wood covered the floor. The top corner, where the bite marks had previously been covered with a garbage bag to keep out cold air and dust. Now the entire door lay broken across the hallway. Light from outside poured into the house. For several seconds, none of us moved. My sister and I looked at Mom. Mom was the adult. Adults always knew what to do. At least, that was what we believed. But Mom looked just as frightened as we were. She stared toward the open doorway. Dust and tiny pieces of wood floated through the air. Then something rolled into the house. An Easter egg. It came to a stop in the middle of the hallway. Smoke began leaking from it. Mom reacted before either of us could understand what was happening. She shoved us backward. Then she threw herself toward us. The egg exploded. It was not a massive explosion by military standards, but to 3 people standing inside a small house, it felt enormous. The blast filled my ears. I remember falling. I remember smoke. Then I saw the shape outside. Something was standing beyond the destroyed doorway. Large, wide, almost human. Two long shapes rose from the top of its head. Ears, it stepped closer. And then I understood what I was looking at. A rabbit, or something pretending to be one. It stood like a person. Its body was huge and thick. Its arms and legs were covered in dirty fur. Its face had the basic shape of a rabbit, but there was nothing cute about it. It looked like some terrible idea of a rabbit created by someone who had only heard the animal described. The kind of thing that might exist in a nightmare. Even now, I cannot watch movies with frightening rabbit costumes. People have suggested Donnie Darko to me. I refuse. If Frank had looked like the thing standing outside our house, the movie would have ended much sooner. The creature stopped at the entrance. It stared at us. My sister and I rushed to Mom. She had been hurt by the explosion. Together, we helped her stand. Then, we climbed the stairs. The creature watched us the entire time. It did not chase immediately. That somehow made it worse. It knew we had nowhere to go. We locked ourselves inside our bedroom. We turned the small bolt on the door. I remember actually feeling safer for half a second, as though a tiny metal lock would stop something that had destroyed our front door. Mom tried to calm us. She told us everything would be okay. Her voice was shaking so badly that none of us believed her. Our bedroom had always been our safe place. The walls were covered with posters. Stuffed animals sat on shelves and around our beds. The night lamp still glowed beside us, but now the room felt like a cage. There was only one possible escape. The window. Before we could reach it, the glass shattered. Something flew into the room. Another Easter egg. It hit the floor. The shell cracked open. This time, there was no blood. No strange fetus. Instead, a tiny toy crawled out. It was shaped like a mouth. Just a mouth with little feet. It began laughing. A horrible, high-pitched laugh. It made no sense. Nothing happening made sense. The sound of the toy was interrupted by something downstairs. Boom, a heavy impact. Then another. Boom, the creature was climbing the stairs. But it was not walking normally. It was jumping, both feet together. Boom, a pause. Boom, another jump. Closer. Boom, closer. Boom. Each impact shook the floor. Mom made a decision. She kicked the laughing toy away. Then, she opened the window. Cold night air entered the room. She looked back toward the bedroom door. I saw something change in her face. That was the moment my mother truly understood that this was real. There would be no explanation in the morning. No police report that would make sense. No adult solution. Boom, 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 the creature had reached the hallway. Mom told us to climb through the window. I was too afraid to move. So my little sister went first. She climbed onto the windowsill. She hesitated. We were on the upper floor. Leaving through the window was not something any of us had ever practiced. Then I heard the bedroom door creak. I turned around. The lock was moving. For one ridiculous second, I thought the creature was simply forcing the door open. Then I saw its paw through the gap. It was holding something. Another Easter egg. The egg opened into a collection of tiny tools. A lockpick. The rabbit was picking our lock. Even now, that detail makes me feel sick. It was not just an animal. It understood doors, locks, tools. It knew exactly what it was doing. My sister tried to climb out faster. Then, the door opened. The creature stood there. It began striking one paw against the floor, slowly at first. Thump, 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 then faster. Thump, 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 the rhythm increased. My heart followed it. All three of us froze. For a few seconds, we simply stared at the impossible thing standing inside our bedroom. Then, it reached somewhere against its body and produced another egg. It cracked it open. A lighter appeared. A small flame. The creature dropped it. The fire spread immediately, far too quickly. Our house was made mostly of brick, but somehow the flames raced across the room as though everything had been soaked in fuel. The posters caught, the curtains burned, the stuffed animals blackened. Smoke filled the ceiling. Then the rabbit jumped. Mom and I dropped to the floor. My sister did not. The creature caught her. I heard her scream. It crashed through what remained of the window, carrying her with it. Glass exploded outward. For 1 second, I saw my sister in its arms. Then she was gone. Mom grabbed me. The fire was spreading behind us. There was no time to think. We crawled through the broken window. The opening that had once allowed only sunlight into our room became our escape. Somehow, Mom and I made it outside. I do not clearly remember the fall. I remember pain. I remember grass. I remember looking back at the house. Flames had already consumed most of the upper floor. The fire moved with impossible speed. Everything we owned disappeared that night. Clothes, photographs, toys, furniture, every physical piece of our childhood. But none of that mattered. My sister was gone. The official story became complicated. There had been a fire, that part was true. But nobody found my sister's body inside the house. Nobody believed our explanation. How could they? A giant rabbit had attacked our home with exploding Easter eggs. It had picked a lock. It had started the fire. Then it had taken my sister. Try telling that story to a police officer. Try telling it to child services. They investigated Mom for years. They suspected neglect, abuse, maybe even murder. Psychologists interviewed us. Psychiatrists evaluated us. People tried to convince us that trauma had distorted our memories. Maybe my sister died in the fire. Maybe Mom and I invented the creature because the truth was too painful. Maybe my brain created a monster to give shape to something I could not accept. I tried to believe them. For years I tried. It would have been easier. But I remember what happened. I remember the footprints. I remember the destroyed grave. I remember the bite marks on the door. I remember the things standing outside our house. Most of all, I remember my sister's scream. After the creature carried her through the window, I heard that scream moving away from us, farther and farther, across the yard, into the darkness. It became quieter, then weaker, then it disappeared completely. And suddenly there was only the sound of crickets. That is the part that still destroys me. The night became peaceful again, as though nothing had happened, as though the world had not just changed forever, as though my sister had never existed. I have spent most of my life trying to escape that moment. I cannot. I could destroy my hearing, and I would still remember her scream. I could blind myself, and I would still see what I saw that night. A huge, humanoid shadow moving away from our burning home. 2 long ears rising from its head, its body disappearing slowly into the darkness. It moved by jumping, one enormous leap after another. And in its arms, it carried my little sister. That is what happened to her. So when people enter my home, look at the photograph, and ask me the question, I give them the answer they can understand. an accidental fire. Then I changed the subject, because I learned a long time ago that there are some truths people do not want to hear. And every Easter, when I see brightly colored eggs in stores and children carrying baskets through parks, I remember that perfect spring day in 1989. I remember the strange egg hidden among ours. I remember what was inside it. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is completely silent, I find myself staring at the ceiling, listening, waiting, because a part of me still expects to hear it again. Boom, 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 story 3. Some things never really change. When I was a child, I spent recess sitting alone with my own thoughts. Now I am an adult, and somehow I still spend recess the same way. The only difference is that now I am the teacher. While the other teachers gather around tables and talk to one another, I usually sit somewhere by myself. Every now and then, one of the other educators looks in my direction. Most of them quickly turn away when they notice that I have seen them. I know what they are looking at. It is impossible not to notice. The scar cuts across the right side of my face, starting near my cheekbone and twisting downward like some badly grown piece of flesh. It is thick, uneven, and darker than the skin around it. I once thought it looked like a cauliflower covered in blood, the kind no one would choose from a grocery store because it was too ugly to buy. I know that is a terrible comparison. But once you see the scar, you understand. Children stare at it too. Adults are better at pretending they are not staring. Children do not bother pretending. Most elementary school students do not exactly consider their history teacher to be the coolest person in the building anyway. They certainly do not want to spend recess talking with their teacher, especially one who has a scar covering half his cheek. I cannot really blame them. So, even during Christmas, when everyone is supposed to be warmer, kinder, and full of holiday spirit, the tradition remains the same. I eat alone. That particular afternoon, I sat by myself with a reindeer-shaped cookie in one hand while the cafeteria around me exploded with noise. Children shouted over one another. Someone was crying because someone else had stolen a pencil. A group of boys were loudly discussing football. At another table, several students were arguing about the new superhero movie. Somewhere behind me, I heard someone mention VTS. I had absolutely no idea what VTS was. Maybe a video game. Maybe an app. Maybe something children had invented specifically to remind adults how old they were becoming. Despite all the noise, one conversation to my left caught my attention. A group of younger children had gathered near the school's Christmas display. At the center of it sat Santa Claus. Of course, it was not the real Santa Claus. At least, not the Santa Claus children thought they knew. This one was probably somebody's uncle or a parent volunteer wearing a rented red costume and an uncomfortable fake beard. One boy stared at him with complete excitement. "I'm going to ask him for a Nintendo Witch 2, he announced. I nearly laughed into my cookie. The kid had a lot of confidence in a man wearing a rented suit. Then another child responded. "Do you really believe that? Santa doesn't exist." I stopped chewing. There's always one child whose parents have already destroyed the illusion, and who immediately feels the need to destroy it for everyone else. The first boy looked offended. That's not true. I stared at him from across the cafeteria. He was right. Not in the way he believed. But he was right. I suddenly wished that he could stay innocent forever. I wished he could continue believing in flying reindeer, magical workshops, cheerful elves, and a kind old man who entered homes once a year to leave presents under Christmas trees. I wished I had been allowed to believe in that version for longer. Unfortunately, I know the truth. And more than anything, I wish Santa Claus did not exist. I learned that on Christmas Eve in 1994. At the time, I was still young enough to believe my parents understood absolutely nothing about me. In my defense, I was going through a very serious phase in my life. I had discovered a popular boy band. I was completely obsessed with them. According to me, it was not a phase. It was a lifestyle. My parents did not agree. They also did not understand why I needed to eat every cookie in the house. That Christmas Eve, my mother caught me reaching toward a plate she had prepared. "No, son," she snapped. "Those cookies are for Santa." I pulled my hand back. My mother had a certain way of correcting me. She liked to say her slaps were given with love. My skin had a different opinion. That night, however, she only gave me a warning. She lifted the plate and carried it toward the living room. I watched her disappear into the darkness. For some reason, she did not turn on the lights. I remember thinking that was strange. Then again, adults did strange things all the time. The moment she disappeared, I began counting. I waited. 1 second. 2, 3, then I moved. I slipped toward the pantry like a much less athletic version of Tom Cruise in one of those spy movies. The good cookies were kept on a high shelf because my parents thought I could not reach them. They were wrong. I had developed a system. There was a particular spot on the wooden cabinet where I could place my right foot. If I pushed hard enough, I could lift myself just high enough to reach the shelf. I was convinced my parents had never noticed. This was despite the fact that the wood had become scratched and worn from the many times I had used it as my personal climbing wall. In my mind, I was a criminal genius. I managed to grab one of the hidden cookies. I was not worried about the consequences. At worst, I thought Santa might leave me cold. That seemed like a fair price. The cookie was worth it. At that age, cookies had a strange power over me. I would probably have risked my entire Christmas morning for one extra chocolate chip cookie. As I climbed down, I heard footsteps. My mother was returning. I slipped. My foot hit the floor harder than I expected. For one terrifying moment, I thought I had been caught. I quickly hid the cookie. My mother appeared in the doorway. She looked at me. Then she smiled. She did not ask what I was doing. I felt incredibly proud of myself. Clearly, I thought, I was a master of deception. "We already agreed," she said, "that you can only have 2 cookies a night." I did not remember being present for that discussion. Still, I said nothing. Later, my mother took me to bed. I crawled beneath the blankets and buried myself inside them. She sat beside me and began our usual prayer. I repeated the words quietly. Afterward, she kissed my forehead. If there had been school the next morning, she probably would have reminded me that she would wake me up early. Instead, it was Christmas. Everything should have felt safe. Everything should have felt warm. She finished the prayer, "And deliver us from evil." Amen, then she left. The door closed. My room became dark. I wished the prayer had worked. Eventually, I fell asleep. I do not know how long I slept before something woke me. The old automatic garage door had started moving. The motor was ancient. Whenever it opened or closed, the entire house seemed to shake. The vibration was so strong that, in my childish imagination, it felt like the whole neighborhood was experiencing an earthquake. I opened my eyes. My bedroom was completely dark. Usually there was at least some light from the hallway, but not that night. I listened carefully. The garage door stopped. Silence returned. I thought about getting out of bed and checking. Then I decided against it. My parents had probably left for some reason. Maybe they had forgotten something. Maybe they were visiting someone. Children are very good at creating explanations when they do not want to be afraid. I waited for a while. Nothing happened. Then I remembered the cookies. The cookies meant for Santa, the one sitting in the living room. The temptation was immediate. I climbed out of bed and hurried down the hallway. I did not turn on the living room light. I did not want my parents to see the light from outside if they returned. Even in the darkness, I could see the outline of the plate. The cookies were still there. Beautiful, untouched, waiting. I grabbed the plate and carried it into the kitchen. There, I turned on the light. Now I could properly appreciate my crime. I ate the cookies with milk. Did I pour the milk into a glass like a civilized person? Of course not. That would create evidence. I would have to wash the glass. At that age, the idea of washing a glass apparently seemed more dangerous than stealing Santa's cookies. So I drank directly from the container. The cookies were incredible. I remember the taste far more clearly than I should. Soft dough, chocolate chips, cold milk washing everything down. Every bite felt like a perfect combination of sweetness and warmth. Every crumb that fell onto the floor seemed like a tragic waste. For 3 wonderful minutes, nothing else in the universe mattered. There was no school, no parents, no Santa, no rules, only cookies. By the time I finished, the plate was completely empty. I stood there, feeling proud of myself. Then, I carried the plate back toward the living room. That was when my body reacted before my mind understood why. A strange sensation moved through me. Not fear exactly, something deeper. An instinct. The kind of feeling animals probably have when they realize a predator is watching them. I ignored it. Then I heard the sound. Scree, each, something sharp scraped across the ceramic plate. I froze. The sound came from behind me. Very slowly, I turned around. The only light in the living room came from the street outside. It was weak and yellow. Our neighborhood was not wealthy, and the public streetlights seemed designed to illuminate almost nothing. At first, my mind could not understand what I was seeing. Something large occupied part of the living room. It was red, wet, shining. At first, I thought it was some kind of giant ball. Then, it moved. My stomach dropped. The thing was almost as large as our couch. Its body looked like a huge sphere of slimy red flesh. I would not say it had a face. There were no eyes, no nose, nothing human. But it had a mouth. At least, I think it was a mouth. It was more like a black hole opening in the red flesh. Inside were rows of sharp teeth. Too many teeth. The jaws seemed capable of opening far wider than anything living should have been able to manage. And from that mouth came packages. Christmas presents. Badly wrapped boxes covered in a thick layer of slime. One after another, the creature seemed to vomit them out. The gifts landed near the Christmas tree. I stared. My mind refused to accept what my eyes were showing me. Around the red body moved dozens of pale appendages. They twisted constantly. White limbs, tentacles, arms, I still do not know what to call them. Each ended in a sharp claw. They moved independently, reaching in different directions, touching the furniture and scratching the floor. One of them was different. One claw was dragging itself across the empty ceramic plate I was holding. Scrape, 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 it was searching, looking for something. The cookies. I realized the creature had expected to find cookies. Instead, it had found me. For one long moment, neither of us moved. I stared at the thing. It had no eyes, but somehow I knew it was aware of me. My childish mind searched desperately for an explanation. Maybe this was a costume. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe I was still asleep. But the creature was too real. The smell was too strong. A mixture of something sweet, rotten, and wet filled the room. Slime dripped from its body. Its claws continued twitching. It was a nightmare that seemed to have crawled directly out of some broken branch of evolution. Nothing about it obeyed the laws of nature. Then it moved toward me. The red sphere did not walk. It rolled, or glided. Its limbs pushed against the floor while its soft body shifted forward. I screamed. Then I ran. Naturally, I immediately tripped. My foot caught on the edge of the living room step, and I went face first onto the floor. For one painful second, I lay there thinking that perhaps I should have taken physical education more seriously. Then I remembered what was behind me. I turned. The creature was already coming closer. Its large, gelatinous body climbed over the small step without slowing down. Apparently, stairs were not going to save me. I pushed myself up and ran again. This time, I made it farther. I could hear something sliding across the floor behind me. The claws tapped and scratched. The creature was following. I needed somewhere to hide. I made another bad decision. I ran into the garage. The moment I closed the door, I realized what I had done. I had trapped myself. I hated our garage. I had always hated it. Once, I had found a giant centipede inside. Even now, I still remember that thing. Before the events of that Christmas Eve, the centipede had been one of the most frightening creatures I had ever seen. Afterward, it seemed almost friendly, by comparison. The garage was also freezing during the rainy season. Sometimes you needed 2 jackets just to stand inside comfortably. The old garage door motor made a horrible grinding noise whenever someone used it. The sound was so loud that every dog within 2 blocks seemed to start barking. The only light came from a single dusty bulb hanging from the ceiling. That bulb created more shadows than light. Still, at that moment, the garage seemed better than the living room. I leaned against the door. I tried to control my breathing. Maybe the monster could not follow me. Maybe I was safe. Scratch. I jumped away. Scratch, scratch. The claws were attacking the door. Thin lines appeared in the wood. Each scratch cut deeper. Small cracks opened. Light from the hallway slipped through. I backed away. The creature continued. The door was not stopping it. It was barely even slowing it down. Then the thing entered. I still do not fully understand how. It squeezed through the damaged opening as though its entire body had no bones. Its red flesh compressed. The white limbs folded inward. Then it expanded again inside the garage. It felt like the creature was mocking me. My brilliant plan had lasted only a few seconds. I moved deeper into the darkness. I found the darkest corner and pressed myself against the wall. At the time, hiding in darkness seemed clever. Years later, I realized how stupid that was. The thing did not have eyes. Still, somehow, the plan worked. For several seconds, the creature moved around the garage without coming directly toward me. Its pale limbs touched shelves, boxes, tools, the floor. I held my breath. Maybe it could not find me. Then something shifted beneath my back. A bag. Before I understood what it was, the bag tore open. Coal spilled everywhere. Black chunks struck the floor. A cloud of dark dust rose into the air. The sound seemed unbelievably loud. The creature stopped. Every one of its white limbs turned in my direction. I knew immediately that I had been found. The red body rotated. Then it moved toward me. I backed away. There was nowhere left to go. The wall pressed against my back. The creature approached. I expected it to attack. I expected those teeth to open. I expected it to tear me apart. Instead, one of the pale appendages reached toward my face. I froze. The claw did not cut me. The soft part of the limb touched my cheek. Slowly, carefully, it felt almost gentle. The creature began exploring me. Its skin was wet and slimy. Each place it touched was left covered in a thick, clear fluid. When the limb tried to pull away, it briefly stuck to my skin. The contact was horrible and strangely comforting. That is the part I hate admitting. The creature touched my face again. Another limb moved across my other cheek. One wiped away a tear. The gesture was almost tender. Warmth spread across my skin. I stopped crying. More appendages reached forward. They moved over my arms, my shoulders, my legs. The sensation made me shiver. I should have been terrified. Part of me still was. But another part of me felt calm. Safe almost. It made no sense. This impossible thing had chased me through my house. It had forced its way into the garage. It was covered in claws and teeth. Yet the way it touched me felt careful, curious, almost loving. One limb moved around my neck. Another touched my ears. My breathing became faster. The creature explored my hair, my chest, my eyelids. I closed my eyes. For a moment, sight no longer mattered. I could feel every point where the creature touched me. The warmth, the slime, the strange pressure. I stopped resisting. I gave in to the sensation. Then one of the appendages moved lower. It wrapped around my waist. Another brushed dangerously close to my groin. Something inside me snapped. The calm disappeared immediately. Instinct took over. My hand reached for the nearest object. My fingers closed around a piece of coal. I swung. The coal struck the creature. Its body jerked backward. A terrible howl filled the garage. It was unlike any sound I had ever heard, deep and high at the same time. The creature twisted violently. Its limbs whipped through the air. One of the claws caught my face. Pain exploded across my right cheek. I screamed. Warm blood immediately poured down my skin. The creature pulled away. For 1 second, I thought it would attack me. Instead, it fled. The red sphere rolled toward the door. Its white limbs pulled it forward at incredible speed. Within moments, it was gone. I stood alone in the garage. Blood dripped from my face. I touched my cheek and pulled my hand away. My fingers were red. I should have stayed there. I should have waited for my parents. Instead, I followed. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted to understand. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe some part of me needed to know where the creature had come from. A trail led through the house. My blood marked part of it. The creature left something else behind. Slime, drool, a shining trail stretched across the floor. I followed it carefully. Through the hallway. Into the living room. Past the Christmas tree. The badly wrapped presents were still sitting there. I looked toward the place where the trail ended. The fireplace. The chimney. I stared upward. And finally, I understood. I understood how it had entered the house. I understood how it had left. The cookies. The presents. The coal. The chimney. All those years, all those stories, all those songs. Adults had told us the truth. We had simply imagined the wrong thing. Santa Claus was real. And that Christmas Eve, I met him. Story 4. My dad eventually decided that I needed to see a somnologist. That is just a more professional word for a sleep specialist, someone who studies sleep disorders and tries to understand why people cannot sleep properly, why they wake up at strange times, or why their minds and bodies behave in unusual ways while they are sleeping. At the time, I did not really believe anyone could help me. Still, my father wanted to try. He had already watched my condition slowly destroy my life, and I think doing nothing made him feel helpless. Every morning, he could see the dark circles under my eyes. He noticed how I avoided my bed whenever possible. He saw me drinking coffee at strange hours and forcing myself to stay awake until my body simply gave up. He knew I was afraid of sleeping. What he did not know was how afraid I was of what happened after I fell asleep. The sleep specialist turned out to be a very nice woman. She was intelligent, positive, professional, and genuinely eager to help me. Even now, after everything that happened, I appreciate what she tried to do. I appreciate the small amount of hope she gave me. I appreciate the fact that, for at least a short time, she treated my condition like something that could actually be understood. Something that could possibly be treated. Something that might have an answer. I only wish helping me had not cost her her life. Before I explain what happened, I want to say something quickly. This is the third time I have written about my experiences. I honestly did not expect people to keep reading. I did not expect anyone to care. But some of you have. And strangely, that has helped me. Not physically, of course. My actual condition has not changed. I still experience the same thing every time I sleep. It does not matter whether I sleep during the day or at night. It does not matter whether I am in my own bed, on a couch, in a car, or somewhere completely unfamiliar. Sleep is enough. Every time I lose consciousness, I wake up somewhere else. Inside someone else. Inside someone who is already dead. Writing about it has not stopped that. But knowing that there are people out there reading my story makes me feel a little less alone. Sometimes, that is the best I can ask for. My father arranged the appointment with the sleep specialist after realizing that my condition was not improving on its own. I did not know what to expect. In my head, I imagined someone who looked like the kind of scientist you would see in an old movie. I pictured wild, messy hair, thick glasses, a long white lab coat, someone eccentric and slightly strange who would speak quickly while explaining complicated theories that neither my father nor I would understand. The woman we met was completely different. Her hair was always neatly pulled back into a clean ponytail. She did not wear glasses. I never saw her in a white lab coat. Instead, she wore brightly colored button-up shirts that somehow looked both friendly and professional. She had the kind of personality that made you believe she actually listened when you spoke. That was rare, especially for me. By then, I had already learned that most adults did not know how to react when I explained what happened to me during sleep. Some believed I was lying. Others thought I was having nightmares. A few assumed I was mentally ill. My father did not fully understand it either, but at least he believed that I believed it. That was enough. The specialist began with a simple interview. We sat in her office while she held a clipboard and asked me question after question. When did my sleeping problems begin? How many hours did I usually sleep? Did I have nightmares? Did I ever experience sleep paralysis? Did I hear voices while falling asleep? Did I wake up confused? Did I use medication? Had I ever suffered a head injury? Did I drink alcohol? Did I take drugs? Did anyone else in my family have serious sleep disorders? I answered honestly. Eventually, she asked me when the problem had first started. The night I turned 13, I said. Her pen paused for a moment. Your 13th birthday? I nodded. And it has continued since then? Every time I sleep. She looked at me carefully. Every time? Yes, regardless of how long you sleep? Yes, even short naps? I nodded again. Her expression changed slightly. Not disbelief. Interest, that made me nervous. Then she asked me to explain exactly what happened during these episodes. I hesitated. I looked at my father. He was sitting beside me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he gave me a small nod. So I told her. I explained that every time I fell asleep, I found myself looking through the eyes of someone who had died. I did not dream about them. It did not feel like a dream. I became aware inside their bodies. I could see whatever their dead eyes were facing. I could hear sounds around them. I could feel physical sensations. Cold, pressure, touch, sometimes pain. But I could not move. I could not speak. I could not control the body. I was only there. Watching, trapped, until something eventually pulled me back into my own body. The specialist began writing faster. I continued describing some of my experiences. I told her how the dead bodies were never the same. Sometimes the person had died peacefully. Sometimes they had not. Sometimes I woke inside someone only moments after death. Other times, the body had clearly been dead for much longer. I explained that I had no control over where I went, no control over whose body I entered, no way to wake myself up. When I finished, the room was quiet. She kept writing. Her pen moved across the paper so quickly that I wondered how she could possibly read her own handwriting later. Finally, she stopped. She looked up at me. Then she smiled. It was a normal smile. Warm, reassuring. I'd like to examine you, she said. The examination itself was ordinary. She checked my eyes, my reflexes, my breathing, my general health. She asked more questions. Eventually, she pointed out the obvious. I was severely sleep-deprived. I gave a weak shrug. I try not to sleep. She frowned. Why? I stared at her. I thought the answer should have been obvious. Because I don't want to wake up in another body. She studied me for several seconds. Then she wrote something else on her clipboard. After finishing, she turned toward my father and me. Given the length of time I had been experiencing these episodes, she explained, along with their frequency and intensity, she wanted to perform a sleep study immediately. Not that exact day, but as soon as possible. My father agreed. I did not. Not immediately. The idea of sleeping in a laboratory while strangers watched me made me uncomfortable. More than that, I worried about what would happen. What if I slept and nothing happened? What if, for the first time since I was 13, I simply dreamed normally? Then everyone would think I was lying. Or worse, what if something did happen? What could they possibly see? Would the machines detect it? Would my brain activity change? Would my heart stop? Would I disappear completely? I had no answers. Neither did the specialist. But eventually, I agreed. A few days later, my father drove me to the sleep lab. The room they prepared for me was designed to look less clinical than a hospital room. There was a bed, a small table, soft lighting, and equipment positioned around the room. Still, it was impossible to forget that I was being observed. They attached sensors to my body. Wires ran from my head and chest toward machines that would monitor my sleep. The specialist explained what each device measured. Brain activity, heart rate, breathing, movement. I barely listened. I was too nervous. My father stayed nearby. The specialist told me to relax and try to sleep naturally. Naturally, I almost laughed. There had been nothing natural about sleep for me since I was 13. I lay there staring at the ceiling. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Eventually, exhaustion won. It always did. No matter how afraid I was, my body could only fight sleep for so long. My eyes closed, and like clockwork, I opened them somewhere else. I was sitting in an armchair. The room around me was dark, but not completely. Thick shades covered the windows, blocking most of the outside light. A tall shelf stood nearby. It was filled with books, porcelain figurines, small plants, and framed photographs. In one corner stood a decorative fireplace. The room was small, comfortable, cozy even. Directly ahead of me was an open doorway leading into a hallway. Beyond it, I could barely see the lower part of a staircase. I stayed still, not because I wanted to. I had no choice. Over the years, I had developed small habits that helped me survive these experiences mentally. One of them was avoiding looking directly at the body I inhabited for as long as possible. Sometimes, knowing too quickly made things worse. So I studied the room first. The furniture, the decorations, the shelves, the photographs, anything except myself. Eventually, though, there was nothing else left to examine. I looked down. The hands resting on the arms of the chair were heavily wrinkled. Thin fingers curled stiffly against the fabric. A loose silk bathrobe covered a fragile body. On the feet were small, light pink slippers. I was inside the body of an elderly woman. She was sitting upright in the armchair. Dead, for the first time since entering the body, I felt a small amount of relief. That probably sounds terrible, but elderly people who died naturally were often easier for me to experience. Not easy, never easy, but easier. There was usually no blood, no violence, no horrible injuries. Sometimes family members were nearby. Those experiences were sad, but there was also something peaceful about them. Sometimes I saw people hold the dead person's hand. Sometimes I heard them say goodbye. There was grief, but also love. Compared with some of the things I had witnessed, that almost felt comforting. So I relaxed slightly. I began studying the room more carefully. Photographs covered the walls. There were decades of memories. The old woman as a teenager, the old woman graduating from high school, the old woman standing beside a young man on their wedding day. Then pictures with children. Later, the children were older. Then there were grandchildren. 3 generations of smiling faces surrounded me. I found myself becoming interested. That had become another small coping method, learning about the dead. Not literally. I never knew their names unless someone nearby said them. But I could sometimes understand pieces of their lives from the rooms around them. The photographs, the belongings, the furniture. In some strange way, it made the experience less horrifying. I was not only trapped inside a corpse, I was briefly seeing the remains of someone's life. This woman had clearly been loved. Her children appeared successful. There were photographs of them wearing professional clothing. Some stood outside office buildings. Others posed inside workplaces. One appeared to work in medicine. Another seemed to own a business. Then I noticed one particular photograph. It was positioned on the wall at an awkward angle. I could not see it clearly, but one of the old woman's adult children looked familiar. Very familiar. I stared at the picture. Something about the face bothered me. I knew that person, or I had seen them before. I just could not figure out where. Then I heard movement. A scraping sound came from the hallway. I looked toward the doorway. An elderly man slowly passed by. He was using a walker. The metal legs scraped softly against the floor with each step. He stopped. Then he turned into the room. He called out a name. I assumed it was the woman's. He shuffled forward. He called again. I immediately knew what was about to happen. I looked away. I did not want to watch. I had seen this before. Someone discovering the body of someone they loved. There is a moment when they do not understand. They call the person's name. Then they touch them. Then they understand. That moment always hurts. The old man moved closer. His voice became less certain. He called his wife's name again. I kept my eyes pointed toward the floor. I heard the walker scrape closer. Then it stopped. There was silence. A shaking hand reached into my vision. He touched the dead woman's hand. Her hand. My hand. His fingers felt warm against the cold skin. Then he touched her face. My face. His hand trembled. He said her name again. His voice broke. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to leave. This was too personal, too private. I felt like an intruder, a stranger watching something I had no right to see. The old man leaned closer. He cried. He whispered his wife's name. Tears fell onto the bathrobe covering the body. I could feel them. Warm, small drops. I sat there helplessly. I could not comfort him, could not speak, could not close my eyes, could not tell him that I was sorry. I could only exist inside the body of the woman he loved while he realized she was gone. For several moments, neither of us moved. Then, a terrible thought entered my mind. How many times would I have to experience this? How many people would I watch discover their dead parents, their spouses, their children? Would I eventually stop caring? Would I become numb? Would there come a day when someone cried over the body I inhabited and I felt nothing? And then another thought came. What would happen when my own parents died? Would I experience one of them? Would I wake inside my father's body? Would I watch someone discover him? Would years of seeing death make me feel nothing when it happened to my own family? I forced the thought away. I could not handle it. Eventually, the old man pulled away. He stood beside the chair for another moment. Then he slowly turned. He shuffled back into the hallway. I watched him move toward the stairs. He climbed into a stair lift. The small machine activated. I listened to the motor as it slowly carried him upward. The sound grew quieter, then disappeared. I looked back toward the photograph, that familiar face. I focused harder. Who was it? I wished I could move my head, even slightly. I needed a better angle. The more I stared, the more certain I became that I knew that person. Then I heard a shout. The old man's shout. A second later came a terrible crashing sound. I looked toward the hallway just in time to see him falling down the stairs. His body hit one step. Then another. Then another. The walker fell with him. Finally, he struck the floor at the bottom. The sound was horrible, a heavy, sickening thump. Then silence. My heart felt like it was pounding, even though the body I occupied had no living heartbeat. I listened. Please move. Please say something. Anything. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then came a groan. Long, weak, full of pain. I immediately wished I had heard nothing. The man was alive, but badly hurt. He began calling for help. No one answered. He called again. His voice was weak. I sat in the chair, unable to move, unable to help, unable to even look directly at him from where the body was positioned. Minutes passed. His groans filled the hallway. Every sound made me feel more helpless. I wanted someone to come. A neighbor, a family member, a caregiver, anyone. Nobody did. The old man called for help again. Then, after some time, he called his wife's name, the same name he had spoken earlier. He sounded confused, then hopeful, as though he expected her to answer, as though he had forgotten that he had just found her dead. He called again. At first, there was expectation in his voice, then confusion, then fear. Finally, resignation. He understood that no one was coming. I wanted out. I wanted to wake up. I would have screamed if I could. I wanted to cover my ears. I wanted to shut my eyes. But the dead body gave me no control. So I listened. The old man's voice grew weaker. His words became slower. Eventually, they were barely words at all. He kept calling for his wife. Again and again, like a broken recording. Then suddenly, I was gone. I woke up in the sleep laboratory. I sat upright so quickly that some of the wires pulled against my skin. I grabbed my head. A sound escaped my throat. Half groan, half sob. Tears began falling. My father immediately moved toward me. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and pulled me close. For once, I did not resist. The sleep specialist stood nearby. She waited. She did not immediately ask questions. I appreciated that. After a while, when I could speak again, she asked me to explain what I had experienced. So I told her. Everything, the old woman, the armchair, the bookshelves, the pink slippers, the family photographs, the old man, the stair lift, the fall, the cries for help. At first, she wrote quickly. Then, her pen stopped. Only for a second. She looked up at me. Her expression had changed. Then, she began writing again. I continued. The further I got into my story, the slower she wrote. Eventually, she was barely writing at all. When I finished explaining the room, she started asking questions. Very specific questions. What color was the wallpaper? I answered. Where exactly was the fireplace? I told her. What kind of figurines were on the shelf? I described them. Was there a framed photograph beside the doorway? Yes, her face tightened. She asked about the staircase, the hallway, the furniture, the placement of decorations. She had stopped taking notes completely. Her eyes were growing wider, more frightened. My father looked confused. I was confused, too. Then I remembered the photograph. The familiar woman. Suddenly I understood. The sleep specialist was the woman in the picture. She was one of the old woman's children. I looked at her. She looked at me. I think she knew I had figured it out. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then she stood. I need to excuse myself. Her voice was controlled, professional, but barely. She left the room. The door closed behind her. My father immediately turned toward me. "What just happened?" I explained. "The photograph, the woman in it, the resemblance." His eyes widened. Before either of us could say anything else, the door opened. The sleep specialist rushed back inside. She had her phone in one hand. She quickly put it in her pocket. Her face looked pale. "There's been a family emergency," she said. "I need to leave." My father and I started gathering our things. She led us toward reception. Her movements were fast, almost panicked. She told the receptionist to schedule another appointment for us. Then she headed toward the exit. Before leaving, she looked back at me. I will never forget that expression. Fear, confusion, disbelief, and something else. Something almost like accusation. Then she walked out. The receptionist stared after her. She looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. She normally never acts like this. My father and I exchanged a look. Neither of us explained. We scheduled another appointment. The next day, the office called us. The receptionist was crying. She told us the appointment had to be canceled. My father asked why. There was a pause. Then she told us the sleep specialist had died. She had been killed in a car accident. According to the receptionist, she had been rushing to her parents' home when it happened. The words seemed to freeze the room around me. The receptionist quietly cried on the phone. My father eventually thanked her. He offered his condolences. Then he hung up. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Neither of us spoke. Then he turned away. That is what my dad does when something scares him. He looks for something practical, something he can fix. A broken appliance, a loose cabinet door, a bill, anything with a solution. But there was nothing he could fix that day. I sat at the kitchen table. I rested my chin on my folded arms. And I thought, had I caused it? Had my condition killed her? Maybe I had somehow seen the future. Maybe the old woman and old man were still alive when I entered the woman's body. Maybe what I experienced was something that had not happened yet. Or maybe it happened at the exact moment I was sleeping. I still do not know. But the specialist recognized the house. She recognized every detail. She knew something was wrong. She rushed to her parents. And she died trying to reach them. The guilt began to eat at me. What if my condition was protecting itself? What if people were not supposed to understand it? What if anyone who got too close to the truth was punished? Would every doctor die? Every researcher? Every person who tried to help me? Was I dangerous? Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but simply because something attached to me did not want to be discovered. That night, I was terrified to sleep for a different reason. I kept thinking about the specialist, about her brightly colored shirts, her calm voice, her clipboard, her genuine excitement when she thought she might be able to help me. I wondered what her last moments had been like. I wondered if she knew she was going to die. And one thought would not leave me alone. When I finally fell asleep, would I wake up inside her body? Would I see through her dead eyes? Would I be trapped inside a crushed car? Would I hear emergency workers outside? Would I feel broken glass against her skin? Would I experience the final result of the accident that happened because she tried to help me? Eventually, exhaustion took me. I slept. I woke inside another dead person. But it was not her. I never inhabited the sleep specialist's body. I do not know why. Maybe I should be grateful. Maybe I should be afraid. After her death, My father and I never visited another sleep professional. We never scheduled another study. We never looked for a second opinion. My father stopped bringing up treatment, and I stopped asking for help. Because now, whenever I think about finding someone who might understand what is happening to me, I also think about that woman. I think about how quickly her pen moved when I first told her my story. I think about the moment it stopped. I think about the fear in her eyes when I described her childhood home. And I think about the last time she looked at me before walking out of the building. Sometimes I wonder whether she blamed me. The worst part is that I cannot honestly say she would have been wrong. Maybe I did not cause her death. Maybe it was only an accident. Maybe everything that happened was an impossible coincidence. That is what I want to believe. But my life stopped feeling like a place where coincidences happen a long time ago. So now, I keep my condition mostly to myself. I write about it here. I tell strangers, but I do not ask professionals to investigate anymore. Because I am starting to believe that whatever happens to me when I sleep does not want to be understood. And I am afraid of finding out what it might do to the next person who tries. Story 5. Poor Helen, said the young blonde nurse as she stood behind the medication cart, carefully dropping pills into small paper cups. The comment came so suddenly that Susan looked up from the chart she had been checking. What's so poor about her, Deb? Debbie lowered her voice slightly, though not enough to keep anyone nearby from hearing. It's just sad. Her kids dropped her off here yesterday. Susan gave her a confused look. So, how is that different from anyone else here? I don't know, Debbie said. She just seems different. Brighter, I guess. More alive than most of the people we normally get. You should have seen her when they brought her in. She was begging them not to leave her. Really crying. She kept saying she could help with the grandkids, clean the house, cook, do anything they needed. Her son and daughter-in-law just stood there. They weren't listening. Then they turned around and left. Susan shrugged. Maybe it was hard for them, too. Sometimes people need to rip the Band-Aid off quickly. Still what? I don't know. It just didn't feel right. Susan sighed. You don't know why they put her here. And you, of all people, should understand what happens when people get to that age. They start forgetting things. They lose track of where they are. Sometimes it happens slowly. Sometimes all at once. It can be dangerous to have someone like that driving or watching children. You never know when their mind is going to go. Helen Palmer heard every word. She was sitting in a faded paisley armchair less than 20 feet away, holding a paperback horror novel open in her lap. Helen was not used to people feeling sorry for her. She was even less used to people speaking about her as though she were a dangerous object that needed to be stored somewhere safe. She kept her eyes on the page, pretending to read, while wondering why the two women were talking so loudly. Maybe they assumed she couldn't hear over the television. The large flat-screen TV in the common room was turned up almost painfully high, mostly because several residents complained that they could not hear it otherwise. Or perhaps Debbie and Susan simply assumed Helen was nearly deaf like many of the other people living there. Either way, they did not seem to realize she had heard everything. Helen stared at the same paragraph for several seconds before finally giving up. She glanced around the common room. Most of the residents were sitting in chairs positioned around the television. Some were watching. Others simply stared in its general direction without appearing to care what was happening on the screen. A few people played cards at a small table near the windows. Another woman sat near the entrance, watching the front door as if expecting someone to walk through at any moment. That was what disturbed Helen most about the place. Everyone seemed to be waiting for a phone call, waiting for a visitor, waiting for dinner, waiting for a card game, waiting for someone to remember that they were still alive. The room itself was bright. Afternoon sunlight poured through the large windows, covering the floor in warm squares of gold. But despite all that light, the place somehow felt lifeless. Helen looked down at her book again. Before she could find her place, Debbie began walking around the room with the medication cups. She handed them out one by one, checking names as she went. Eventually, she reached Helen. "Miss Palmer?" Helen looked up. "Here's your afternoon medication. Just a couple of pills for arthritis and blood pressure, correct?" "Yeah, okay then, here you are." Debbie smiled in the careful, polite way people often smiled at children and old people. "I hope you enjoy your time with us here. And remember, if you need anything, just let one of us know." Humph. Helen took the paper cup and immediately looked back down at her book. Debbie stood there for another uncomfortable second before moving on. Condescending bitch, Helen thought. Stuck-up old woman, Debbie thought. Helen swallowed the pills and tried once again to concentrate on her novel. It was a cheap horror paperback with a black cover. The only visible features on the cover were a pair of glowing eyes and several rows of sharp teeth beneath the author's name. It was not a particularly good book. Some parts were badly written. Other parts were so predictable that Helen knew exactly what would happen pages before it happened. But she liked it. Helen had already read the classics, some of them more than once. She had read Austen, Hemingway, Dickens, Bront, and plenty of others. Whenever anyone asked why she sometimes read ridiculous horror novels, she claimed she enjoyed bad books when she was depressed. The truth was that she often enjoyed those books more than the classics. Unfortunately, reading was almost impossible in the common room. The television was too loud. Residents kept talking. Someone was always coughing. And the news channel seemed designed specifically to make people miserable. Helen looked toward the television. A serious-looking man in an expensive suit was speaking directly into the camera. Something has to be done about this wave of crime spreading across the country. Another young couple was found massacred in their home, apparently torn apart. It is unconscionable. Police departments are failing to stop these attacks, but this is what happens when people demand cuts to law enforcement funding. If only our leaders would, the host interrupted him. "I agree with you 110%. We'll be back with Dr. Madison after this." A commercial began. An actor Helen vaguely remembered from television 30 years earlier appeared beside stacks of fake gold coins. Experts say the gold and silver markets may soon collapse. Protect your retirement by investing in copper. Call today for your free investment information packet. The next advertisement showed an older man running on a beach. Feel young again with the power of the wolf. Our unique supplement uses powerful natural extracts inspired by wolf biology to improve mobility, vision, energy, and vitality. Customers have reported improvements in heart health and male performance. Call now and receive an extra month's supply, absolutely free. Helen rolled her eyes. Another commercial showed a perfect family dancing around a backyard barbecue. A cheerful voice explained that their lives had once been destroyed by arthritis, eczema, shingles, or some other condition. But thanks to a new medication, they were smiling again. Ask your doctor if Helen stopped listening. "We're back with Dr. Madison," the host announced. Helen sighed. It was all nonsense. Fear mixed with advertisements. Problems followed by products. She would never have watched this garbage at home. At home, Helen had spent most of her days doing things she actually enjoyed. She had a garden, a real one. Tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, herbs, zucchini. She loved growing things. She loved the feeling of dirt on her hands and the smell of leaves after rain. She also loved cooking. Recently, she had become obsessed with Asian food. Japanese dishes, Chinese dishes, Korean dishes, Thai dishes. The techniques were completely different from the American and European cooking she had grown up with, and learning something unfamiliar made her feel alive. Helen pushed herself up from the chair. Her knees protested immediately. She quietly cursed her arthritis and hoped the pain medicine she had taken earlier would start working soon. She spotted Susan near the nurse's station. "Susan?" Susan looked at her name tag, then at Helen. "Yes, Miss Palmer. Is there a kitchen here that residents can use?" "A kitchen?" "Yes, somewhere I could cook sometimes." Susan smiled. "Miss Palmer, you don't have to cook anymore. We take care of all that. I know I don't have to. I want to. Well, your children purchased the premium care package for you. All your meals are included. That's nice, but I like cooking. All of our meals are prepared off-site. A company delivers hot food 3 times a day." Helen frowned. "I was experimenting with some Japanese recipes before I came here. We do have a microwave in the staff break room. You could probably use that." "A microwave?" Susan nodded. "We used to have a full kitchen. What happened to it?" "Insurance became too expensive. Corporate decided the risk wasn't worth it." "Where was it?" "You know the dining room with the vending machines?" "Yes, it used to connect to the kitchen. They converted the kitchen into storage. That's a shame." Helen thought about her house. "I'll miss cooking." Then she thought about her backyard. "And my garden. I had the biggest zucchini coming in this year." Nearly ready, too, Susan looked sympathetic, though Helen could not tell whether the sympathy was real. "You know, Helen, if you ever want food from outside, I could pick something up for you." Helen looked at her. "Really? Sure, you just need to help with gas money. Gas is ridiculous right now. Almost $6 a gallon." Helen stared at her for a moment. "No, that's all right. You sure?" "Yes, I think I'm going back to my room." 2 months later, Helen was sitting across from her son, Dave. "Mom, it's only been 2 months. You have to give it more time." "Dave, I don't like it here." "I know." "No, I mean I really don't like it here. You told me last week. On the phone. Everyone sits around all day watching television or playing the same card games. Nobody wants to learn anything new." "Mom, I tried teaching some of the women mahjong." Dave rubbed his forehead. "And?" "They refused." "Why?" "They said it was a chink game." Helen whispered the last 2 words. Dave stared at her. "Seriously?" "Yes, maybe don't hang around those women anymore." "Dave, they're all like that. They watch the news and old crime shows over and over again. If I have to watch another episode of Ninsis, I swear I'll blow my fucking brains out." "Mom." "What?" "Don't say things like that. I'm joking. That's not funny." "It was a little funny." Dave sighed. Helen leaned forward. "Please let me stay in your guest room." "Mom, I can help. We've talked about this. I can cook, I can clean, I can help Jeffrey with his homework. I can pick up the kids from school. You can't drive anymore." "That girl hit me." "I know. She hit me in the back." "I know, Mom. The DMV still took my license." I know. Helen crossed her arms. One of the nurses here tried to squeeze gas money out of me. She told me gas was almost $6 a gallon. Dave looked uncomfortable. I'll mention it to management. That's not the point. Then what is the point? The point is I want to come home. Dave looked away. Mom, I can't do this. Why? Work is insane. Jeffrey is failing math. Daniel has soccer. Everything is a mess. I can help Jeffrey. I have a goddamn degree in mathematics. They teach it differently now. Helen stared at him. What? The new math. Common Core. I don't understand it. Dave, there is no new math. Numbers did not suddenly change because I turned 70. Mom, it's just taught differently. Mom, please. She became quiet. Then she understood. Georgia doesn't want me there. Dave said nothing. Helen felt something inside her sink. Why? I always got along with Georgia. No, you didn't. I tried. No, you didn't. That's not fair. I have to go. Dave, I need to stop at the grocery store before picking Daniel up from soccer. Dave, please, just try to make the best of it, Mom. He stood. Helen remained seated. Please don't leave me here. Dave hesitated. Then he opened the door. Call me later. The door closed with a heavy thud. Helen sat alone. Then she began to cry. Not quiet tears. Not dignified tears. She cried until her chest hurt. Months passed. One afternoon, Harold and Billy sat in front of the television complaining about Helen. That new woman who's always reading those garbage books is so uppity, Harold said. Billy nodded. I hear you. Always looking at us like she thinks she's smarter than everybody. The television continued in the background. Another suspected mauling, this time in California. Harold pointed toward the screen. See that, Bill? Those California hippies think they've got the world figured out. But they're no better than anybody. The host appeared beside Dr. Madison. Thank you for joining us again, Doctor. We know you're busy following this disturbing wave of mutilations terrifying communities across the country. The president is expected to hold a press conference later today. What do you think is happening? Dr. Madison frowned. Seriously. It's shameful. Our society has fallen into a deeply sinful state. Many of the victims are young people in the prime of their lives. Something must be done. They need Jesus, Harold announced. Billy nodded. That's what they need. Back in the 80s, we didn't have this garbage. Kids could play outside without worrying about perverts. Actually, Helen said from behind them, crime rates were extremely high during parts of the 80s. Harold turned around. Not in my town. That doesn't change national statistics. Where'd you hear that nonsense? A book. Harold rolled his eyes. Helen continued. It was exploring why violent crime dropped so sharply in later decades. And one theory connected part of the decline to legal abortion becoming more available. Harold's expression darkened. Baby killers. You one of those hippies too? God, no. Helen lowered her book. I find abortion unpleasant. The argument was more complicated than that. The idea was that unwanted children were statistically more likely to experience neglect, instability, and circumstances connected to future crime. Poor children were more likely to be unwanted, but poverty itself wasn't necessarily the main cause. Harold stared at her. Helen stared back. And I'm not uppity. What? I heard you two talking about me. Billy laughed. Helen pointed at Harold. You sour old grump. I don't think I'm better than you. I just don't want to be here. Harold's face softened slightly. Helen looked down. My son hasn't visited in 4 months, just phone calls. Nobody spoke for a moment. I guess I'm stuck here. Harold leaned back. We're all in that boat, darling. Do you get used to it? Eventually, Helen hesitated. Do you get used to hating your children? Harold looked at the television. Yeah, he said quietly. You do. A commercial suddenly interrupted the silence. Unlock the power of the wolf. Become the alpha. Feel young again. Helen laughed. Who is stupid enough to buy that garbage? Billy immediately burst out laughing. He slapped Harold's arm. She's calling you stupid. Harold glared at him. Screw you, Billy. Helen looked at Harold. You bought it? That stuff works. Of course it does. I'm serious. My joints don't hurt as much. I'm moving better. Helen studied him. He actually did look better. I think I'm even growing hair back. Billy laughed harder. Harold ignored him. Hell, I had my first hard-on in 10 years. Then he winked at Helen. Looking at you, sister. Helen immediately stood. You are disgusting. Come on. I should have stayed in my book. She walked away while Billy howled with laughter. Over the following weeks, even Helen had to admit that something about Harold had changed. He was stronger, more energetic. His hair was visibly thicker. He walked with less pain. He seemed almost younger. Beth certainly noticed. One afternoon, Helen and Beth sat near the television while another advertisement played. A reverse mortgage gave me independence during my golden years. Beth watched with interest. You know, a friend of mine did one of those. Said it worked great. Helen had been daydreaming about her garden. Huh? The reverse mortgage. Oh yeah, maybe. My kids sold my house. Helen turned toward her. Mine too. They used the money to help pay for this place. Same. Beth sighed. You miss your house? Every day. I miss mine sometimes. But after Bob died, I couldn't handle all the repairs. Hiring people was expensive, too, and you can't trust everybody nowadays. Half those handymen are crooks. Yeah, Helen nodded. I had a boy in my neighborhood who helped with heavy things. Good kid. Then he went away to college. My son used to help. So did mine, when he had time. Hey, ladies. Harold approached them. He was walking faster than usual. Helen stared at him. Maybe that ridiculous wolf supplement really was doing something. His posture was straighter. His face looked healthier. Even his hair seemed thicker. Hey, Harold, Beth said, smiling like a schoolgirl. Ready for our walk? I've been waiting all day. Beth stood. Bye, Helen. See you tomorrow for bridge. Helen watched them leave together. She shook her head. Then she flipped through several television channels. Nothing interested her. Eventually, she gave up and went to bed. Several nights later, someone knocked on Helen's door. She opened it. Harold stood outside, holding a bottle of brandy and 2 glasses. Helen immediately frowned. What could you possibly be thinking, knocking on my door this late? She already knew. Harold's eyes had changed over the last few weeks. He looked at women differently now. Hungrily, I was thinking about having a nightcap, he said. Saw your light was still on, sister. Before Helen could stop him, he stepped into the room. Don't you barge into my room, you buffoon. Relax. I'm not interested. Come on, girlie, have a drink. Girlie? Helen pointed toward the door. Get out, Harold smiled. You're always so tense. Maybe a drink would loosen that stick. You exhaust me. I'm going to bed. Harold stepped closer. Too close. Helen could feel his breath. I could join you. His voice sounded strange, lower than usual. Rough, his eyes remained fixed on her. Then Harold smiled. For a second, Helen thought his teeth looked unusually sharp. She stepped backward, bumping into her nightstand. The lamp rattled. No, Harold stopped. Helen swallowed. I haven't shared a bed with anyone since my husband died. Harold studied her. Are you scared, sister? Helen said nothing. His expression softened. Because none of this is fun if you don't want it. He stepped away. I'll leave. That would be best. Harold picked up his bottle. At the door, he paused. There was something else I wanted to talk about. Helen folded her arms. What? I've been thinking about something you said. That's dangerous. I'm serious. He looked down. What you said about unwanted children and about hating your son. Hate is a strong word. You asked if you get used to hating your family. Helen remembered. Yes, I told you that you do. Harold became strangely quiet. That was a lie. Helen watched him carefully. You don't get used to it. He stared at the floor. I understand those unwanted kids now. What do you mean? I keep having these thoughts. What kind of thoughts? Harold looked at her. For the first time that evening, the confidence disappeared from his face. Uncomfortable ones. He stood silently for several seconds. Helen felt a strange chill. Then Harold opened the door. Good night, Helen. Good night, Harold. He left. Helen locked the door behind him. She stood there thinking. Harold had admitted to having uncomfortable thoughts. What bothered Helen was that she had some of her own, and some of them were about him. She quickly pushed those feelings away. Before going to bed, she poured herself a small glass of sherry. 2 mornings later, Helen woke to voices outside her room. What do you mean he's gone? It was Debbie. Susan answered in a frightened whisper. He's not there. Where could he go? I don't know. His room is empty. What about the window? Broken. Helen sat up in bed. Susan continued. And his clothes are torn apart. Debbie lowered her voice. You think it was one of those attacks? Wouldn't there be a body? What? All those news reports. The victims are usually chewed up, I guess. Susan sounded nervous. His room looks like a bear tore through it. Smells like one, too. I'm calling the police. I hope he's okay. Debbie paused. He was doing so much better recently. Susan made a small sound of agreement. Did I tell you he hit on me last week? No, I almost went for it. Debbie, what? He's like 80. A young 80. Susan laughed nervously. I said almost. Then Debbie's voice became serious. You have noticed it too, right? Noticed what? It almost looked like he was aging backward. Helen had heard enough. She lay back down. 2 days later, the residents gathered around the television. The news anchor looked unusually serious. This time, the violence has reached our own community. A local family was discovered mutilated inside their home early this morning. Helen slowly lowered her book. Police have not released complete details, but investigators say the attack appears similar to other unexplained killings reported across the country. Beth covered her mouth. The anchor continued. A manhunt is now underway for Harold Messner, the grandfather of one of the victims. The room went silent.